You want me to sign over my condo, my business, everything I built, because your son blew through his inheritance and needs a bailout?" My mother's voice didn't waver. "Your family, Maya. That's what family does." I stood there in my own kitchen, in the home I'd bought with money I'd earned before I turned 27. And I realized something I'd been avoiding for years. My family didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as a contingency plan. Let me back up. I was adopted when I was 3 years old. My parents, my adoptive parents, already had a biological son named Derek, who was 5 at the time. From what I was told, they'd always planned to adopt. They wanted a big family. They wanted to give a child a home. Those were the words they used at every holiday dinner when relatives asked about me. We wanted to give her a home. As if that sentence was supposed to make me feel something other than like a charity project with a seat at the table. Growing up, I was never treated cruelly. I want to be clear about that. There was no abuse, no neglect in the obvious sense. I had clothes and food and a bedroom with a window that faced the backyard. But there was always a difference, and I felt it the way you feel a draft in a house. You can't always see where it's coming from, but it's always there, making one side of the room colder than the other. Derek got a car for his 16th birthday. I got driving lessons, which fine, I was grateful for, but I also noticed. Derek got tutoring when he struggled in school. When I struggled, I was told I needed to work harder. Derek's college application essays were reviewed by a consultant my parents hired. Mine were reviewed by me alone at the kitchen table at midnight because I didn't want to ask and hear the hesitation before the yes. I got into a good school anyway. A really good school, actually. A state university with a strong engineering program, full merit scholarship, the kind of acceptance letter that should have been taped to the refrigerator. My mother congratulated me. My father said, "See, you didn't need our help." And I remember thinking, that's not the compliment you think it is. I graduated in 4 years with a degree in software engineering and zero debt because of that scholarship. I moved to Austin. I got a job at a mid-sized tech company, learned everything I could, and after 2 years, I started freelancing on the side. By year 3, I had more freelance clients than I could handle. By year 4, I had incorporated my own LLC and hired my first contractor. I didn't tell my family much about it, not because I was hiding anything, but because every time I mentioned my work, the conversation found its way back to Derek. How he was trying a new business idea, how he had so much potential, how he just needed the right opportunity. I learned to stop offering openings. By the time I was 27, I owned a 2-bedroom condo in Austin that I'd put a down payment on myself, had a software consulting firm bringing in just over $1 million in annual revenue, and had a team of 6 contractors working with me regularly. I was proud of it, quietly, privately proud, the kind of proud that doesn't need an audience because it was built without one. Derek, meanwhile, had gone through 3 failed businesses in 5 years. The first was a fitness supplement brand that never got off the ground. The second was a food truck that lasted 8 months. The third, and this is where things get complicated, was a real estate investment venture that my parents had funded to the tune of $300,000. $300,000 that they had liquidated from their retirement savings to give him, because they believed in him, because he was their son, because he just needed the right opportunity. The venture collapsed. I found out from my aunt, not from my parents, because my parents didn't call me to talk about Derek's failures the way they didn't call me to talk about my successes. I sent my mother a text asking if they were okay financially. She said they were fine. She said Derek was regrouping. She used the word regrouping, like he was a general planning his next campaign, not a 32-year-old man who had just lost his parents' retirement savings on a real estate deal he hadn't properly researched. 3 weeks after that text exchange, my parents drove to Austin unannounced. I remember the knock at my door on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in a video call with a client, and I stepped away to answer it. And there they were. My mother in her good coat, my father with his hands in his pockets, Derek standing slightly behind them like he was waiting to see how the room temperature was before he walked in. I let them in. I made coffee. I sat down across from 3 people who had driven 6 hours without calling ahead, and I waited. My father spoke first. He explained the situation with the investment, the full version, which was worse than what my aunt had told me. They hadn't just lost the $300,000. Derek had taken out a personal loan using the family home as collateral, and that deal had also collapsed, meaning they were now at risk of losing the house itself. They needed a significant amount of money, quickly, to restructure the debt and protect the property. I asked how much. My mother said, "We were thinking you could refinance your condo and sign the equity over to help cover it. And we also thought, since your business is doing well, you could bring Derek on as a partner, 50%. It would give him stability and give you someone to help manage things." The room was very quiet for a moment. "You want me to sign over my condo equity," I said slowly, "and give Derek 50% of a business I built by myself to cover a loss from an investment I had no part in and was never consulted about." My mother said, "Your family, Maya. That's what family does." And that was when I understood. Not just in an emotional way, I'd understood emotionally for years. I understood it structurally, finally, clearly. I was not a daughter in this family. I was a resource that had not yet been accessed. They had invested everything in Derek, their money, their attention, their belief. And when that investment failed, they looked around for what else they had, and they found me. Standing there with a condo and a business, and a reputation I had built while nobody was watching. I told them I needed time to think about it. They stayed for 2 days. Derek spent most of it on his phone. My mother reorganized my kitchen cabinets without asking. My father watched television and made comments about Austin being too expensive for what it was. Before they left, my mother hugged me and said she knew I would do the right thing. I spent the next week thinking very carefully. I called my attorney. I had a business attorney I worked with regularly, a woman named Patricia, who had helped me structure my LLC and draft my contractor agreements. I explained the situation. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I appreciated most about her. When I finished, she asked one question. "Have your parents or your brother made any formal legal claims against your assets?" I said not yet, but I was worried they might. My mother had made a comment before leaving about how legally, family has certain rights, a comment that had no basis in anything but had been rattling around in my head ever since. Patricia said she wanted to look into something. She asked me to send her any documents I had related to the original purchase of my condo, my business incorporation, and any communications with my family about the financial situation. I sent everything. 2 days later, she called me back. Her voice was careful, in the way that meant she had something significant to say. She told me that while she was reviewing the documents I sent, she'd noticed something. When I had originally set up my LLC 3 years earlier, I had listed my home address at the time, which was an apartment I was renting, as the business address. When I moved into my condo, I had updated the address with the state but hadn't updated one specific filing. It was a minor administrative oversight, not unusual, not damaging on its own. But Patricia had also found something else. In looking at the documents related to Derek's real estate venture, which I had shared with her because they'd been forwarded to me as part of my parents' explanation of the situation, she noticed that the LLC Derek had formed for the venture listed a managing partner. The managing partner on record was not Derek. It was me, my name, my signature, or something purporting to be my signature, on an LLC filing I had never seen, never signed, and never agreed to. An LLC that had taken out loans, entered into contracts, and ultimately defaulted on obligations that were now being pursued by creditors. I sat with that information for a long time. Then I called Patricia back and said, "What do I do?" She said we needed to move on several fronts simultaneously. First, she would file an affidavit of forgery with the state, formally disputing my involvement in the LLC and flagging the signature as fraudulent. Second, she would send a certified letter to my parents and Derek notifying them that I was aware of the filing and that any further use of my name or signature in any legal or financial document without my explicit written consent would result in immediate legal action. Third, and this was the part that made my stomach drop, not because I didn't want to do it, but because I understood what it meant, She recommended I report the fraudulent filing to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division and to the IRS, given that the LLC had filed tax documents under my name. Someone had filed taxes using my name. Someone had signed my name to legal documents. Someone had, in the most technical and literal sense, committed fraud and identity theft. I knew who. I didn't confront them. Patricia advised against it, and I agreed. Instead, I did what she recommended. I filed the affidavit. I sent the certified letter. I submitted a report to the FBI and a separate report to the IRS with the documentation Patricia had compiled. My mother called me 3 hours after the certified letter arrived. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message saying that there had been a misunderstanding and that Derek had thought he had my permission and that we needed to talk before I did anything drastic. Derek had thought he had my permission to sign my name to an LLC that filed taxes, that defaulted on loans. I didn't call back. My father called the next day. His message was shorter. He said, "Maya, please, you're going to destroy this family." I sat with that voicemail for a long time, too. I thought about the car I didn't get at 16, the consultant I didn't get for my college essays, the congratulations that always came with a pivot toward Derek's potential, the retirement savings they'd liquidated for him without a second thought, and the way they'd driven 6 hours unannounced to ask me to repair the damage. I thought about standing in my own kitchen, hearing my mother say, "That's what family does," as if family was a one-way street they'd just discovered had a toll. I didn't respond to my father's voicemail. The investigation moved slowly, the way these things do. Patricia kept me updated. The state confirmed the signature forgery. The IRS opened an inquiry. The FBI acknowledged receipt of my report. None of it was fast. None of it was dramatic. And most of it happened in documents and phone calls I wasn't directly part of. What I was directly part of was rebuilding the wall I should have built years earlier. I changed the contact information on every account, every filing, every document that had my family's address or phone number attached to it in any way. I updated my emergency contact at my doctor's office, at my bank, everywhere it appeared. I met with a different attorney, an estate attorney this time, and I got my affairs in order in a way that was clear and documented and left no ambiguity about what I owned and who had any claim to it. The answer to that last question was no one. My aunt reached out, the one who had told me about Derek's failure in the first place. She had heard what was happening. She said she was sorry. She said she always knew things weren't right, that she'd watched me grow up and always thought I deserved better than I got. It was the kindest thing anyone in that family had ever said to me. And it came at the moment when I had already decided the family was no longer something I needed to belong to. I told her I appreciated it. I meant it. But I also knew that appreciation and proximity were different things, and I needed both my gratitude and my distance. 7 months after that Tuesday afternoon knock on my door, I got a call from Patricia. The state had completed its review of the fraudulent LLC filing. Derek had been formally identified as the individual who submitted the documents. He and my parents, who had known about the filing, which Patricia had established through the certified letter evidence and time-stamped communications, were facing civil liability from the creditors of the collapsed venture, who now had grounds to pursue fraud claims given the forged partnership documents. The IRS inquiry had resulted in an audit of the LLC's tax filings, which had implications I'll leave to the financial professionals to explain, but which were not good for anyone involved. My name was formally cleared from all associated documents. The affidavit of forgery had been accepted. There was nothing attached to my credit, my business, or my legal record. I was fine. I was exactly where I had always been, which was where I had put myself, by myself, with no help from anyone who shared a last name with me. I didn't celebrate. I went back to work. I had a client presentation to finish, a contractor to onboard, a quarterly review to prepare. My life was the same life it had been before they knocked on my door, and that was exactly the point. They had tried to pull me into the wreckage of something I had no part in building, and they had failed, and I was still standing exactly where I stood before. People sometimes ask me, when I talk about my life, when the subject of family comes up, whether I feel guilty, whether cutting off my parents felt like a betrayal of something, whether I wonder what might have happened if I'd just helped them, if I'd written the check and moved on and kept the peace the way I'd been implicitly asked to keep it my whole life. I don't feel guilty. That might sound cold, and I understand why, but guilt requires the belief that you did something wrong. And I cannot locate a single moment in this story where I did something wrong. I built a life. I protected it. I told the truth about what was done to me. That's not betrayal. That's just refusing to be a resource any longer. What I do feel, and this surprised me, is something close to relief. Not the relief of winning something, because I don't think of it as a win. More the relief of finally, fully, knowing who I am in relation to these people. I spent 27 years in a relationship I could never quite define. Was I their daughter, their charity case, their contingency plan? It turned out the answer was contingency plan. And once I knew that, I could stop wondering. My condo is still mine. My business is still mine. My team is still with me. And we had our best revenue quarter last year since I incorporated. I have friends in Austin who know my history and love me anyway. Or maybe because of it. I've never been sure which, and I've stopped needing to know. Derek, from what my aunt has told me, because she and I still talk occasionally on terms I'm comfortable with, is living with a friend and working a regular job. My parents are still in the house, which they were able to keep eventually through some financial restructuring that I know nothing about because it had nothing to do with me. They are alive and they are together and they have each other and they have Derek, who I hope has learned something, though I genuinely don't know if he has. I learned something, several things actually, but the most important one is this. Love that comes with conditions isn't love. It's a contract. And I spent too many years honoring a contract I never signed, right up until someone decided to sign one for me. That was the last straw. And it turns out, sometimes the last straw is a gift. It gives you something to point to. It makes the decision simple. It means you don't have to carry the ambiguity anymore. The maybe I'm wrong, the maybe they didn't mean it, the maybe if I just give a little more. I didn't give a little more. I gave a report to the FBI instead. And I have never, not for one single day, regretted it.